like to call the meeting to order, please. Will you stand and say the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Hankins, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Rolladai.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
We are all here. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 15th regular meeting and the July 8th work session meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Thompson, thank you. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Any questions? Hearing none, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Rolladai.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we will start with some comments of our board members. And Mr. Workman, would you like to start first tonight?
Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to finally see faces in person than it is through the screen. So I had myself up earlier. I'm bad enough from a distance, let alone up there. So I took myself off of there. But thank you for taking time to come this evening. It has certainly been challenging times for all of us. You know, it's nice that it's summer, but it doesn't feel like summer. But you know, hopefully with getting back to school, we can try to get back to some normalcy. So again, I appreciate you coming this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
Education is essential. You know, we've been using this word essential a lot, referencing other places, the medical industry and other types of jobs and requirements. But education is essential. Teachers are essential. The support staff of our school district is essential. And although it may not carry that title up to this point, we are now at a crisis mode where crisis does not necessarily mean a bad thing. It means it's just a point in the road where we have to make a decision. I will tell you, there's so many different opinions on how to do it, but you got to start someplace. We had a work session. Many of you were online to watch it. Many of you have reflected upon it in your emails, and thank you very much for the emails. That's not the only conduit for information that the board has received. Personally, we all are, and those who are here on the screen are connected in this community. We need to know the heart of the people, and that's our job. But also knowing the heart of the people, also still, you bring it back in, you take the information that you have, and you try to do the best you can to identify a starting point. That is what Mr. Cedar and our committee have worked hard to develop. And I would tell you, I've pulled those things for other school districts like Olentangy and other places. There's many of them that people are still grasping and trying hard to get their arms around it. We are not alone in this. But the situation is fluid, and we all know that. And when I read your emails, and I thank you again for those, I appreciate the fact that you appreciate and recognize the difficulty associated with this decision. No one answer addresses it all. No one model addresses it all. But I personally want to thank Mr. Cedar and the committee and the broader Mount Vernon City Schools community to try to come together with a starting point and understand it is a starting point. It's not, what you've seen is not the end of it, because it's going to continue to change. Thanks.
Very well said. Thank you. Dr. Bennett.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, everyone. And I would like to reiterate what everyone else has said, but I won't take time to do that. So I would just like to thank everyone for their thoughtful emails. Lots of good suggestions that I feel have really impacted our decisions. And I know the committee is probably hearing these ideas as well. So hopefully they will be able to help us resolve some of those concerns. And I just thank you for your patience and for your understanding during this time. And we hope that our plan will be resilient. As we know, we'll have to be changing things as we learn more and more information. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Cedar and all of his good ideas and patience with each of us and all the questions we've had. And I know he's working hard to do what's right for kids. And what we want is the safety and health of all of our students, all of our employees, and all of their students' parents. So that's what we're working toward. And thank you for working with us in that. And thank you, Mrs. Getzman.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. And Mrs. Regola Dye.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Superintendent Cedar and all of the committee members for your hard work. I wish everyone a good evening, and I thank you all for attending this evening. I regret I cannot personally be there for this meeting. 2020 has presented us with unprecedented challenges. This pandemic is affecting everyone's lives, particularly our children. We all want our children to be present in school in some manner. Our main focus must always be their safety and security. I am in favor of a hybrid, staggered opening of the Mount Vernon City Schools. By following this model, we can ensure that we hold the threat of COVID-19 at bay as much as possible. We could provide our staff more time to sanitize areas in between the attendance of the children. Our custodians, secretaries, bus drivers, food personnel, teachers, and administrators could focus on the needs of the children with greater peace of mind. In the end, we are all subject to the science of the virus. We must work together to stop the spread. We should follow the guidelines that have been established by health officials at every level, and we must set the appropriate example for others, especially our children. Thank you for your attention. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Regola Dye. And I too would just like to echo, as we go into making our plans for the start of the school year, this was just not a plan that was put forth by just Mr. Cedar or the team of administrators. There was a plethora of administrators, teachers, parents, and the board members as well, that we all came together on numerous committees to come up with a plan that we feel is solid for our district and our community as well. What we have tonight, as everyone has alluded to, is something that's fluid. We await tomorrow to see what the governor has to say. It could all change tomorrow. So know that as of right now, this date, this time, we will talk through a plan that works best for our community and our children. I did reach out to several medical professionals in the community just today to reiterate where they stand as of today as we go back to school. And it was very interesting. These were not my personal doctors or people that I deal with on a daily basis, but they all kind of had the same senses as to where we're directing our start of our year. So it was very interesting to hear their medical feedback as we look to start at the beginning of the year. So welcome. I know we have lots of people working in our buildings currently to get us up and running, and for that support behind the scenes, we are grateful for.
I too would like to welcome everybody. We're trying kind of a hybrid meeting, so to speak. I mean, I know Dr. Bennett is with family and wishes she could personally be here, but we're traveling through the internet airwaves to Indiana. So we thank her for being able to be here, kind of up here. I apologize that you maybe couldn't hear him as well. We're kind of trying to loop this through YouTube Live at the same time. And so when we do that, we get echo and feedback and so on and so forth. And as Mary had mentioned, you know, she wishes she could be here, but is unable. But we thought it important enough to bring all of our board members here, not exclude anybody from this conversation. And normally we might have had a Zoom meeting just because of the proximity and where people are. And we felt it was just too important to do that tonight when we wanted to make sure we were able to share. So again, I want to welcome. We'll try to work through some of the technical things. I've got John at the, back there at the remote control. Hopefully YouTube Live is working, as I know folks are trying to listen from abroad. So again, I guess my welcome as well.
We will start with our monthly report, and I did not see Hayden or a replacement. Not as of
Hayden
yet.
graduated. She's not coming back.
MVEA, I did not see Darcy, but April, Mrs. Thompson is here to represent MVA tonight. Thank you.
April, you might have to turn that on, and that should be it. And then if you want me to pull up your slideshow,
Could you please?
Yeah, I could.
Okay.
All right, let me go ahead and open this up for you. Can everybody see that?
Thanks for having me. It's been a while. I feel like I haven't been here in a while. So last week, after we watched the work session, Darcy and I sat down and had a conversation about how we know the board was asking for feedback specifically from teachers. And we also want feedback from teachers because as the labor management team, we need to enter into a negotiated agreement with the board and Mr. Cedar in order to make sure there's not any grievances that can happen because of change in working conditions. So we wanted to give teachers an opportunity to not just, we don't want to say like, what's your biggest concern? We wanted to make it very open-ended. So we did an attitudinal survey that was, what are your thoughts, questions, and concerns? And we just gave them just the floor. So I want to go through what some of those responses were, what the primary responses were, and also some other little nuggets that I think might be interesting for you. The survey was open for exactly 1 week, and we had roughly 49% member participation. So I mean, if it was during the school year, that would seem fairly normal to me, but I think because it's in the middle of July, that seems like a really good number of participants. Bill, if you want to go to the next slide. So there were 5 top concerns. The first one, and they're in descending order. The top concern is masks. So the majority of respondents, and they had the option to list 4 separate concerns or thoughts. The majority of respondents said that they would feel much more comfortable if all students age 3 through or grade 3 through 12 were required to wear masks. That goes in line with the CDC guidelines, and the majority of participants just felt like they would feel more comfortable teaching if everyone were wearing masks. The second one is physical distancing. I know in Mr. Cedar's green plan, he said a 3 to 6 foot distance. Most teachers, the majority of respondents actually, were hopeful that we could extend that and really try to get maximum physical distancing closer to that 6 foot apart distancing. The next one is a district policy, which I think we are in the process of working on, but teachers are very concerned and they have a lot of questions about what does this look like if I'm exposed, if I am quarantined, if I'm infected, where does the sick time come from? How long do I have to quarantine? And also, how does that look for students? So they really have a lot of questions just on the specific practical policy. Additionally, there is a huge concern about having adequate coverage. Subs have been a problem in our district for years without a pandemic. So there is definitely a concern of if I get sick and I'm out for 14 days, who's watching my class? The other concern was sanitation. Not that there is an objection, of course, to sanitation, but how do you do all the things? How do I, with 3 minutes between classes, spray down all my desks, and be out in the hallway, making sure kids are socially distancing in the hallway. What does that look like? And also, there was a concern with chemical exposure, both for students and staff, especially if you're asthmatic. What do the chemicals look like that we're constantly going to be putting out into the environment? And then also ventilation was a concern that came up many more times than I would have thought, but there is definitely a concern with proper ventilation in all of the buildings, especially in the older buildings. I think we saw that more. Now, the next slide, there were other important and significant considerations. The first one, 13% of our respondents wanted some type of a special consideration made for kindergarten through second grade. So at first glance, I was like, okay, 13%. But then I realized it was pretty much all of the K through 2 teachers. So when I try to frame it that way, I thought that it was worth bringing up. I mean, they're concerned with, I mean, these are the formative years, and they're learning things like how to wash your hands, how to be socially appropriate. So those teachers, the primary concern was, can we do an AM PM? Can we get these kids in smaller groups so we can effectively teach them? 13% of respondents had a general objection to the green option, and were adamant about wanting to reopen in the yellow option. There was a significant percentage of teachers, 13% actually, who were inquiring about starting after Labor Day. So the teachers would come back as normal, and all of the planning for all of the options, you know, for any of the scenarios would take place prior to Labor Day, and then kids would be brought back in. Teachers really feel like they need a little more time to figure things out, to come up with a plan. And I think too, I mean, I don't want to speak for the committee, but we have a lot that we have to figure out too. So that might be helpful. 6 students came up over and over again. As a teacher, we've all had those kids, their parents give them some Tylenol before they send them to school, and then they come to school super sick and they're wilting in your room. So there is a real concern among respondents to have an official policy and maybe even a quarantine room for kids who are displaying, well, just any kind of illness. Policy and professional development for all of the levels came up again and again. So, you know, we assume that there could be a time where we go from green to another color. So teachers, they're not opposed to that. We learned a lot over this, you know, when we were quarantined in the spring. They just want to know, can we get quality professional development that helps us establish a seamless transition, or as seamless as possible. And then lastly, 11% of our respondents listed being in a high-risk population or having a medical condition as being their primary concern for reopening. So then what do we do with this information? Well, our next step, my next step, is to share this information with the reopening committee and then assist in developing policy that we feel helps not only kids, but also teachers. So we really want to keep all of these things in the forefront when we're having those discussions. Additionally, as I said before, we do have to have, MVEA does have to have a negotiated agreement ratified before teachers return to work. So we need to really get in negotiations for that. And then lastly, and most importantly, MVEA just really wants to make sure we're providing an open and honest dialogue, and we're telling you what we're hearing from teachers and what their concerns are. Any questions? Oh, and on the last slide, just, you know, in your free time, if you're interested in looking at our raw data, I've put all of the survey results there for you to peruse. Questions?
I would say thank you. Thank you for taking this step. so that we have this extra information from our essential workers.
Hopefully it helps. I mean, we're all in this together. And I mean, and I think the teachers certainly realize this is a really important task. We don't want to get this wrong. Nobody wants to get it wrong. So we appreciate you listening.
And Mike, did I see Mike come in? It's hard to recognize people with masks sometimes. Okay, Mike is not here for OPSI. We do have 3 people that have signed up for public participation. I will remind you that each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. This portion of the meeting during which the public participation of the public is invited shall be limited to 15 minutes, which we will be under that. So the first one is Matt Snow. Matt, thank you.
Hello. So first, thank you all for the time to be able to speak today. Thank you for your responsiveness over emails today, making sure technology and whatnot would be on our side. I want to introduce myself a little bit so you have some context in my perspective. First of all, I come to you as a product of the school district. Graduated in '97. My wife and I both, and have moved back and now have 3 kids in the district from kindergarten to 8th grade coming into the school year. So I'm also a statistician, so I believe in transparency through data, through planning. And, you know, we see a lot of stats about what's happening, the proportions of people infected and whatever. But when we think about this school year, you know, the outcomes aren't that we lose 0.1% of our child. The option is, you know, they survive or they don't. So it comes down to a real binary outcome that we take very seriously as we consider our options for our kids. So my ask of you all, and I realize this is an unfair forum to do that because I'm going to say a lot. I think a conversation is better, and I'm happy to do this over phone call or sit down in a socially distant, appropriate way as well. Because I think the traffic light system, the plans make a lot of sense and they're easy to understand. But my ask is, how do we move between those? What are the metrics you're looking for? Is it number of cases? Is it deaths? Is it costs between each of those outcomes? What are the costs to the school district to run on a green, yellow, or red? Are there trade-offs? What if we run out of money? How do you telegraph those changes to the community, to the teachers, so that they can prepare and that they're adequately transitioning between those, so it's not today we're green, tomorrow we're yellow, the next day we're red, and they've got to flex and operate in all of those situations. Same thing with parents. You know, how do we then become teachers and nurses and educators and administrators in that span of time as well? So, you know, I'm looking for some response from you all. It doesn't have to be today. Again, happy to continue this conversation in a number of ways to understand, what are you looking at to know success? How are we operating in green? And that's where we're going to stay. And this is it, right? So that I think it protects you, so that it's not just conversations you're having, thoughts in your heads that we don't have access to, but it's data that we can watch for. It's things that we can play by and see that as well. So again, hopefully that provides some input, some context. If you come up with a formal structure around those metrics, I'd love to see that. If not, you know, personally, I will hold you all accountable and judge you by those metrics. And you'll be seeing and hearing a lot from me as we go through this, probably in future meetings to see, you know, how are we succeeding? What is the best plan, knowing that this is all fluid and knowing that nothing's perfect, but how do we know we're progressing? So thanks again. Again, I hope to continue this conversation in a number of ways, and appreciate the time and effort and energy that everyone's put into coming up with this starting point. But hope again for a lot of transparency on how we move forward.
Thank you, Matt.
Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea White. I have 2 children in the district, entering 4th and entering 7th grade. And I want to personally reiterate the top 5 concerns of the teachers are also the top 5 concerns I would consider that I myself and my husband share for going back to school. But also I want the board to keep in mind and consider very carefully our most vulnerable learners, those students who are on 504 plans or IEPs, those students for whom school is a safe place and a place where they might be getting their warmest meal of the day, so to speak. And I would encourage you to take a plan that prioritizes those learners and as much quality interaction as they can get, because they're the ones who are probably going to suffer the most as well through this. But I come here primarily representing Families for Inclusive Schools, which is a group of about 50 individuals, parents, teachers, clergy, and community members who've been meeting monthly for several years. And I want you to know that the State Board of Education passed this past week a racial justice referendum. And I'm going to read 4 paragraphs from that referendum, which are most pertinent here, and then ask what the board will do with the directives that are in this referendum for local districts. So now I'm quoting from the referendum. Whereas a culturally responsive curriculum reflects the history and background of all students and empowers students to value all cultures, not just their own. And whereas research has shown that a culturally responsive curriculum can motivate students to a higher level of academic achievement, and in many cases, increase the graduation rate of previously disengaged students. The State Board of Education strongly recommends that all Ohio school districts begin a reflection and internal examination of their own involving teachers, parents, students, and community to examine curriculum, hiring practices, discipline strategies, suspensions and expulsions, classroom resources, including textbooks and professional development. And be it further resolved that the State Board of Education directs the Ohio Department of Education to provide support for school districts' reflection and internal examination, including identifying and sharing curricular models and resources, holding sessions to allow districts to share and collaborate on their actions, and to track progress in implementing these changes. End quote. There are multiple school districts across Ohio and boards that have already acted on racial justice and social justice, either by passing their own resolution or taking it further by creating working groups of teachers, students, parents, and paid professionals who do this work to assess school climate and implement inclusive education. Some of these districts include Claremont Northeastern, Parma, Columbus, Pickerington, Bowling Green, Elyria, Hilliard, Medina, Cincinnati, Dayton, Marion, Akron, and that was just 3 minutes on Google for me to find those. We know that bias goes unreported and underreported, and it's in fact worse to not hear about it because that the data don't exist is fulfilling that very fact. And if you ask any parent who has a child of color in the district or any student who has already graduated through the district, they can tell you of incidents that they've experienced. I want to give a shout out to Wigan Street that responded very quickly and immediately when some incidents of racial bias occurred last year, and they formed a committee of teachers, parents, and administrators in the building and worked throughout the year to figure out what some responses might look like, both curricular-wise and internal education of teachers. And so I think they were moving forward pretty well on that. They had also hashed out a grant proposal to get books in classrooms across the district. So some of that work has already been done, and I think that the board can piggyback on some of that. They don't have to start from scratch. It does sound like there will be state education support made available for districts to take action. I encourage this board to seek out that support and to create an equity team to address all districts and district and building policies, handbooks, and curriculum, and to adopt an anti-racist policy with direction, specific direction on how to implement it. We at Families for Inclusive Schools look forward to hearing concrete proposals that our district will take to implement the directives that are contained within the State Board of Education resolution. Thank you. And here's a copy with what I read highlighted. It's really hard to find on the web. They haven't put it up yet. It was just passed.
It takes me a while to get a mask off because I wear hearing aids.
I could have left it on, you're right. I'm coming to you today as I was the school nurse for this school district for quite a number of years, and I retired 2 years ago. So in many ways, I'm kind of glad of that. However, when I look at the situation that we're in now, and I'm considering that green light policy, I find it really scary for the children and the staff, all members of our society, honestly. I feel like as a school nurse, it's a job. I think that a lot of people thought, oh, she's the person that puts the Band-Aids on, she gives the medicine. Well, truthfully, the people that put the Band-Aids on and give the medicine are the secretaries, or now we have health aides in the classroom. I mean, in each building. However, you need to understand that health aides are not certified, nor can they make important decisions regarding the health of any child. What the health aides can do and must do are be trained by the school nurse. And so we have 8 buildings here, and you're asking for one school nurse, which is what Mount Vernon hires, one school nurse to do the training for the people in these 8 buildings to handle what does COVID look like, especially when we still don't really know, do we? It's not a hoax, as I've heard, but it's real. And the symptoms seem to be changing pretty rapidly. So how do you decide, well, this kid has to go home? Really? The school nurse needs to let all of those aides and all of those buildings know a kid comes to you complaining of a headache, has sniffles, maybe a sore throat, maybe a stomach ache. They have to go home. They can't stay at school. Who's going to decide that this is not COVID? This isn't a time for a teacher to say, oh, this is a child who complains all the time, because this might be the time that it's something serious. It could affect her health, his health, the teacher, and all of the students around them. Sure, we're saying that children, young children probably aren't transferring this disease as much as older children, but we don't know. We haven't had them in schools for a long time. So I think it's something to be very, very concerned about. I heard the thing about a quarantine room. Who are you going to quarantine? Which one? You know, that's a real problem. So, and then you have a quarantine room, who's watching that child versus the child over here who needs to get medicine. Do you give medicine at the same room that you have quarantined children in? There's just a lot of questions. And so, and again, whatever happens, I know you're a school nurse, and I know the people who work there are going to do their darndest to do it right, because that's how we are. We care about children, the health of all children and all of our staff. That being said, when I was at work, I had a number of staff members who have chronic diseases. And these are the people who are most at risk. We're no longer talking, 20-year-olds. For the most part, they're doing pretty well with this disease. But people who have an underlying condition are not doing well. What about the children with asthma? What about the teachers with asthma? What about the children with diabetes? And we have lots of them. That's a very complicated disease in and of itself. As a school nurse, I spent tons of time working with teaching teachers about what to do with a student with diabetes, with asthma, a child with a colostomy. We had a child with a tracheotomy. These are serious things that need to be taken into account. Are we going to say those children can't come to school? It seems to me like you can't do that. We have the least restrictive environment. So I'm just asking that maybe step back and say, do we need to start school on the day we say we're going to start school? Or can you wait? Can you wait maybe to like September 30th? Let's see what happens after the colleges come back. Would that be unreasonable? Can we see if there's going to be another spike? We just aren't there yet. But boy, if we have a spike and it hits your teachers, it hits a family, it's just not as easy saying, okay, tomorrow we're yellow. I think tomorrow we're done. It's just really, really scary. This is a pandemic, folks. We haven't had one for 102 years. So I think you need to handle it with all the gravity that's there. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Are you signed up? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. We move on for items for discussion. Mr. Cedar?
Are you under board items for discussion? There are
Board
none.
items for discussion, yes. Thank you.
We have none. I do have some additions and deletions to the agenda for tonight. In section 10, section 5, under business services, you'll see in the addition of a Tri-County Educational Service Center agreement. Under section 12, item 4, you're going to see a certificated staff suspension of duties. That's been added to the agenda for tonight. And in section 13, item 4, regretfully, we'll have a classified staff retirement, and that will be of my longtime secretary. So I did want to add those items to the agenda for tonight. You'll see those in the agenda as we go in.
And then we'll move right into superintendent's report, please.
Well, I do have a number of items for superintendent's report. The first and the one that probably is the most interesting based on our conversations is a restart update. I wanted to provide the board with that level of an update. I would also reiterate briefly what Mr. Thompson had shared. I know we've all been getting several emails, especially over the past week. I was not able to respond to some of those most immediately as I was on a family vacation and kind of chose to come back and do a restart, kind of an update. And hopefully we'll get a chance maybe to go back and individually respond to some of those emails while I was out. But I did want to provide this level of update. I think they'll answer some of the comments that were shared. I know sometimes people want to have and get into dialogue after public participation, and kind of the rules of the order is that's not necessarily how you're supposed to operate. But I hope to maybe answer a few of your questions in my update as best I can. And so I'll kind of work my way down through there. So this is a restart update, and let me go to slide number 2. So at the very beginning of our conversation, when we first developed our committees, we came up with some general assumptions that were really, really important to us. First, mandates and recommendations. We said that we'll work closely with state and local agencies while maintaining some level of local control and input. And quite frankly, that was given to us by the governor. And we have worked closely, quite frankly, with some of our area superintendents and districts, as well as Knox Health and others. The other assumption was health and safety. We must protect and promote the health and safety of our students and staff. This will always be at the forefront of our discussions. And while we came out with a green aspirational start, you know, there was some criticism that came our way that we weren't thinking about the health and safety of staff. And that's just simply not true. The devil in the details are the work that we're ongoing now. And those assumptions that we made back then are as true then as they are today. Education, we still believe and instructed by their teachers with their typical peers. However, we must be agile and able to adapt to changing circumstances. Again, a general assumption. Operationally, we must create structures and schedules and protocols that allows us to be operationally efficient and effective, and that's a challenge. And then finally, and this one's really important, it's respect. We said way back when we started this about a month ago that we will respect the various viewpoints related to COVID-19 and the reopening of schools. Everyone here knows that the people have varying viewpoints on wide spectrums related to this, and specifically even the reopening of schools. And while we may agree and we may disagree on some instances, respect is really, really important. And we're going to continue to make sure that we respect all viewpoints. And I want to make sure that you'll see that throughout this as well. Some of you were able to present tonight, and I've had lots of emails. I've had emails from folks who really want all our kids to get back to school and share with me their perspective. I've had lots of emails on folks who think we should start hybrid right away. I've had some that say we shouldn't come back to school. And so I respect all of those viewpoints. And I realize too that those viewpoints often come from a very central point, and it's their perspective. And that's okay. But I need you to understand that as a district, we need to have a district perspective. We need to look through the lens and perspective of all the stakeholders in Mount Vernon City Schools. So what does that mean? It means we need to look through the lens of all the students, gifted to special needs. I know Adrian who just left. I mean, we have our students, we've got to look through the eyes of special needs students, through gifted students, through all of our students, through their health and safety, instructional support, educational support, social, emotional. We have students that have food insecurities. And so we weigh all of those things out when we try to think about what is the best way to begin to start school. We certainly have to look at the staff perspective, from our teachers to our support staff. Their health and safety is vitally important. There's workload requirements that every one of these levels require that, is going to be challenging, to say the least. Not only coming back green, but if we come back or we move into a hybrid, there's a whole nother set of challenges there if we would ever have to go back to red. So we're looking at that. We're looking at professional development for teachers and support staff. And then we need to look through the lens of the parents and the guardians. We have over about 4,000 students. That's a lot of parents and guardians. And I've had emails, again, from all sides of the spectrum. And, unfortunately, we don't have all family structures are alike. We have single parents, we have grandparents raising kids, we have two-parent families. We have work challenges that we hear about. We have families who say, Mr. Cedar, we both work, we have to work. And so we take those perspectives into consideration. Childcare is going to be a challenge. We take those things into consideration. So I only say that to you because sometimes we get focused in on our own perspective. Maybe it's our classroom, maybe it's my child. But as a district, we have to really look at this bigger piece and look at what all of the folks are out there and try to come up with the best plan we can. I think the frustrating part for me is I always want to try to find win-win situations. And this one just doesn't feel like we're going to have win-win situations in every instance. And so we're really trying very carefully to come up with the best plan that we can as we continue to move forward. Just to give you a brief timeline, the governor announced the school restart on Thursday. I can remember that Thursday. It was July 2nd. And there were lots of questions in that press conference. Area superintendents and Knox Health Department officials, we met the following week on a Tuesday, and we really had a great conversation talking among area superintendents and the health department. Answered lots of different questions. The restart committee met on Wednesday, although we had had a couple committee meetings prior to that. We kind of got back together and met on 7/8 to review previous meetings to discuss opening plans and, of course, the work ahead. The board met then on Wednesday in a board preview or a board work session to really talk about what we heard not only from the governor, but what we heard from our local health department, area folks, and our committees. And based on the current information as of July 7th, through the collaboration, again, with local districts, Knox Public Health, Restart Committee, the board, we set an aspirational goal to begin the year green, returning to school in a traditional learning mode with safety precautions and modifications. I presented a video presentation that was created to share with students, staff, and parents last Thursday, a Thursday ago, with the community, and our intention is to work towards a green start to the new school year. It was also stated in that presentation that the real work was ahead. I think there were some that thought, hey, there's the plan, but boy, that's not very specific. Absolutely, it wasn't specific. We kind of set a direction. We kind of had an umbrella of what we're aspirationally trying to do. I mentioned in the video, the real work was ahead, and that's true. And even when I was gone for a few days last week on vacation, the committees met. And interestingly enough, the committees really began to go, okay, we're going to do our best to try to go green. What are the questions we have to ask? What are the solutions and things that we need to work on as we move forward? And questions began to be generated. I put a quote down here by T. Robbins: identify your problems, but give your power and energy to solutions. The thing that I think I most appreciate about working with our unions, our MVEA and our OPSA unions, is we really do a great job of problem solving. We kind of identify problems and we try to come up with these win-win situations as best we can. And we work really hard at that. We're in that process right now of trying to work and identify all the challenges. We may come to the end of this and I may come back to the board and say, you know what, we can't meet ABC challenges. We need to take a step back, as Janet said, and reevaluate where we're at with green. And we've said that from the very beginning, that this was a very fluid situation, but to have an aspirational goal to get all students back in school, I believe that's important. Again, where it leads us, we'll find out as we go through. But working towards that, instead of just saying, you know what, I'm throwing up my hands, we can't do it. We need to work through the problems to make those things, at least give the work effort that's there. The district restart committees consist of nearly 80 staff members. I've heard a few emails like, well, who are you including? Who's part of these things? We're not getting enough representation. We have put together all of these subcommittees. We have over 80 people working on this work. Now, that's not the entire staff, that's not the entire community, but that's a lot of folks meeting at different times. So I feel like there's good representation, and we need to continue that work. And you can see those. We got the educational committees, and that's broken down into technology, primary, secondary, health and safety, communication, social, emotional, operational, from transportation to food service to custodial and maintenance. I mean, those are all committees that are right now, have really been working now for the last week and a half. And so we've got lots of work yet to do. Here's the two areas that I would assert are the greatest concern. And you know what? Ironically, we said this from the very beginning, and those on the Restart Committee will recognize this right off. We said our biggest challenges will be social distancing and masks. All right. And so those were things that we really wanted to work on. The CDC, as many have stated in emails, recommends 6 feet. And we recognize that 6 feet. You're sitting 6 feet right now. And you can see how many folks we can fit in this room. The AAP came out with some recommendations, and the AAP is the American Association of Pediatricians, and they basically talked about spacing could go down as little as 3 feet, but you know, we obviously, like April had mentioned, want to try to stay on that 6 feet kind of a margin. But there was a realization that schools weren't built for 6 feet apart. They just weren't. And we're talking about a population that you know, we have lots of kids moving up and around and doing different things. And so there is definitely a disconnect a little bit there. I'll show you a slide here in a second where we took a couple middle school classrooms and we tried 6 feet, and we tried 3 feet, and we tried 4 feet. You're sitting at 6 feet. Believe it or not, those chairs right there, those are 3-foot circles. We don't space kids that close together generally, right? And so our aspirational goal on social distancing would be try to get to 6 feet, but it will not be possible in all classrooms. But just because it's not possible in all classrooms doesn't mean we just go, well, let's go to hybrid or let's go to remote. I mean, are there other options that we can look at? And that's what the committee should be doing the work to do. And there are some other suggestions that have been brought up most recently. Face masks are the other big one. Are they encouraged or required? You know, listen to the governor's report, and they're strongly encouraged. Teachers, they're required. Staff members, they're required. They're strongly encouraged grades 3 through 12, right? And so we begin to ask ourselves, okay, age, grade level, 3 through 12. Right now we've got counties that are unfortunately in red, and you know, students who are 10 years or younger don't have to wear a face mask, but if they're older, they do. Well, I've got a granddaughter in 3rd grade and she's 8. And so we're getting lots of just kind of different messages relative to age and grade level. And then this other one that seems to have gotten some interest, and certainly among teachers, and I understand, all day. Do we wear masks all day, or do we wear masks when social distancing cannot be maintained? In our original guidance, we required masks for our middle school and high school students. We required it when they were on the bus, when they entered and left the building, when they had transitions going through the hallways. But if they could find that place where they could social distance in a classroom, we made the statement that they could take them off. I'm sitting here in a room and I'm 6 feet apart from everybody, and I feel comfortable being able to take my mask off. You may not, and I would never tell you, oh, take your mask off. You're 6 foot apart. You can wear it. We would never say to a student, you can't wear it, but where is that social distancing and the wearing of masks? I mean, we need to answer some of those kinds of fundamental questions to make people feel comfortable in how we're going to start. And again, I'm going to tell you from the medical field, you'll find viewpoints, as maybe Jody would share, that are on all sides of the spectrum, really. I'm just going to be candid from a personal standpoint. I've been wearing a mask in social settings since the end of March. When I go to Lowe's, when I go to Kroger's, when I go to Walmart, I put on a mask. As soon as I walk out of those situations, it's hanging on my ear. I get in my car and I go home. When I'm at work and I'm walking down the central office hallway, my mask is on. When I walk into my office, it's off. And I can't wait to get to my office and take that mask off. I just think it's going to be a real challenge for teachers, for our students, if the requirement is that they have to wear masks from 7:30 to 2:30 or 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock. If we can't maintain social distancing, then they should have them on, right? And we may have to clarify that. I don't have a problem if I have a staff member who is compromised, truly has a compromising health condition, that maybe we require them to wear a mask when they walk into that specific room, if they can be social distance. But I think there's got to be some sort of a common middle ground. And I felt like when we initially put this face mask stuff out, which by the way, all area superintendents in the county and Knox Health approved, all right, I felt like that was kind of a nice middle area. Now, maybe not so much at the elementary level, because we were playing with the ages, like 10, 8, you know, is it easier to have half your building with kids wearing masks and the other half not, and enforcing it and all of those things. So those are questions that are ongoing. And if it means that we can get started and come to some consensus on that, we're certainly willing to keep those conversations alive. And I enjoy those conversations, and April and I have them all the time. And that's a good thing. But these are the two areas that I think are of greatest concern that we need to somehow remedy. If 6 foot is a standard that we have to match, I can't promise we can do that. I don't think we can do that in every classroom. And so now all of a sudden, basically what we're saying is we're never going to go back to school as normal. And so we have to try to mitigate things in such a way that, you know, when the AAP came out with their recommendations, it was like, you know, when you have to give a little bit on this side to get a little bit, you got to make those tough decisions. And is it better to have kids in school and be 5 feet apart versus not have kids in school and have them 6 feet apart? You know, parents will have to make that decision for themselves. We'll have to make that decision as a board. And again, with our aspirational goal to get all our kids back in school for a whole host of different reasons. And that's really what we're kind of working on. Here's an example at the middle school. We took this picture. So here's a typical classroom. I don't know if you guys can recognize this classroom, April. It's not real. But the principal at the middle school took a classroom, as did lots of principals in lots of buildings, and they tried to set up classrooms just to see what it would look like. This is 3 feet apart. And when they say 3 feet, it's a 3 foot radius around you. And the next one is 3 foot radius around them. And this is what it would look like. And there is space in the front of the room here, and they were able to get 27 desks in this particular classroom. So I would have said in this case, I've got more room to the front. Let's keep social distancing. Let's see if we can get 4, maybe 5, right? Here's what 6 foot looks like. It's a big difference, isn't it? And you're sitting in 6 foot. We have about 20 some people in here. Well, nobody has classrooms this size. And so you have to kind of begin to go, okay, how do we mitigate so that we can get, you know, our students in school, because it's so important for them to be there. We've also been investing in this. We have a company in town that is a plastics company. We're looking at partitions. We're looking at partition for faculty members. We're looking at partitions for desks. Believe it or not, the old student desk has kind of slowly gone away. Everybody wants tables, and I understand why. It's good community work. And so we're looking at developing these partitions and purchasing them to put them in specific classrooms. It can be a challenge. There is an expense to this, but we're looking at all of these options and have been looking at it now for, about 2 weeks. So I want you to know that we're looking at some of these kinds of issues. What I also wanted to share just briefly tonight is in each one of these subcommittees, when I got back over the weekend, I said, because I wasn't part of the meetings that they had over last week, share with me some of your recommendations. I can read their notes, they've got those there, but also share with me the challenges, because I need to know the challenges. If we don't know what the problems are, we can't jump in and try to be creative problem solvers, or we say, you know what, we just can't solve that one, so what's next? Here's just a couple, and I pulled these out of each one of the categories. So under education, we have technology, we have primary and secondary. Some recommendations. We've had some recommendations out of the elementary group that look at staggered starts for kindergarten students, and we had some really well thought out emails that talked about kindergartners, and they're social animals. They want to be right up in there, and they want to be talking to you, and they want to do all these things. So is there a way that maybe we could try some varied starts with them to get them into routines? And it made sense. We need to utilize outdoor space for instruction. We might need to utilize other spaces for instruction. If I'm at the high school, maybe I need to utilize the cafeteria or the auditorium and space kids out in a better way. Maybe if I'm that teacher who has 25 kiddos and I don't have a big classroom, I might have to move to a classroom that's a little bit bigger, or we could look to do some other things that way. I've heard some innovative scheduling ideas to limit daily interactions, everything from block kind of schedules to limiting hallway interaction to keeping kids moving in different directions. We've talked about flipped classrooms and office hours. And so these groups are coming up with some really creative thoughts, but there are challenges. And the first one there, we've already mentioned, personnel, compromised staff members. We don't want to compromise staff members who are in challenging positions. And so what can we do to make sure that we can protect them as best we can? We talked about additional protective equipment for those teachers. We talked about potential reassignment. We've talked about a variety of different things that we could do to help teachers who are in these compromising physical conditions to feel better. And there may be some that just say, I just don't feel like I can. And we'll certainly try to continue to work with them, but I want them to feel comfortable. Substitute teachers, in a regular year, substitute teachers are, and so, one of our remedies with substitute teachers is we say, we can't find one today. Can you take these 6 and you take these? Well, here we are, we're trying to shrink our classes, and yet how do you add more to the classes? And that's a real challenge. And generally our substitute teacher population comes from either brand new teachers or retired teachers. And if you're a retired teacher, you're probably not in that age demographic. You're like, yep, can't wait to go in there and see 100 students. Absent students are a challenge. What happens if a student does have to miss for a period of time? How are we going to handle it? Professional development that MVEA brought up. Utilizing technologies, if we should have to go yellow or red. Yellow, the hybrid format it will have some real challenges trying to teach 2 different groups at the same time. Some who are at home for a couple of days and some that are there. Do you flip-flop them? Do you run them asynchronous? So I know that the committees were even already talking about what yellow could look like. And then, of course, technology devices and applications for K-1 students. We're really looking at that. So they're coming up with great ideas, but there are challenges, certainly. Health and safety, they're providing educational instruction and resources to students, parents, and staff. Signage related to safety, cleaning and sanitation, posters posted throughout the building. Innovative scheduling to limit some of that daily interaction. But there are challenges. And this health and safety group is headed up by Lane, our school nurse. And those challenges are, how do we come up with all the PPE equipment? How do we fulfill those purchases? There's a lot of them. I mean, we have face masks that have come in. We have face shields that have come in. Isolation rooms, which was brought up. I mean, if anybody's walked through our buildings, it's not like we have an empty classroom in every building you walk through. And so, we're begging and borrowing to look at what these isolation rooms might look like. And even to Janet's point, I mean, I've got a nurse doing her nurse job or a nurse assistant doing their job, but who's going to be in the isolation room? I mean, so we have challenges for sure. Who will be in charge of contact tracing was a question that was brought up by them. The health department, we asked the health department very specifically, what do you think our guidelines should be if someone comes down with it? Will that mean that the whole classroom has to go home for 14 days? Does it mean the whole grade level? Does it mean the whole building? And they would say that they have to take a look at every one of these on an individual basis. And there's a contact tracing policy that needs to be developed. And so they may go in and say, okay, who was that person with? Oh, okay, well, let's isolate that group, but maybe I don't have to worry about 3rd and 4th grade because this was a 1st grade situation, or I don't have to worry about Mrs. Jones's class, but we'll focus here. And so they said there is no one perfect answer for how you're going to handle some of those things. But to Matt's point, I think we probably will find ourselves coming up with something that when our district or our county goes into a certain mode, let's say we're in yellow and let's hope we stay there, but we're approaching orange. We're one of the only ones around here that isn't yet. But once we go orange, what does that mean? We go red, what does that mean? Are there automatic points where we say, we're orange now, we're going to this mode, or we're going to require face mask 24/7, or whatever that criteria might be? We need to develop those kind of touch points to know what's going on. Under the social emotional group, they've already developed social emotional needs charts for all 3 modes, green, yellow, and red. As many of you are aware, we now have a school social worker in every one of our buildings. And so that's going to be pretty important as we go through this year and in years to come. The team's developed a list of social emotional programs that are in place and how they can be incorporated in the various learning modes. Even talked about carving out a focus for the social emotional needs of staff. I mean, we always think, quite frankly, of our students and they should always be first, but our staff, we can use that social emotional support too, including me. Challenges. I found this interesting and I was reading the notes on this, and this is what the social emotional group came up with last week. The awareness of social media news fatigue for students and staff. You can't avoid this stuff. And if you want to get on Facebook or you want to get on Twitter or you want to watch the news, you can be so inundated with this. It in itself is a socially, emotionally draining thing. And we need an awareness of that. And I thought that was really creative that they came up with that. Connecting quickly with staff and students to identify social emotional needs. Awareness of racial and other activism issues at the community, state, and local levels. I mean, we sometimes just think about COVID, but when all of this other stuff hit, COVID kind of got put on the back burner and everybody's social emotional was right into everything else that was going on. And so being aware of other issues outside of COVID, I thought was very creative as well. Operations and food service, flexible routines, including times and locations. That group has met. Every building's different. Some have cafeterias, some don't. There's been a lot of conversation about do we have times that we really vary the times? Do we eat in classrooms? Do we eat some in the cafeteria, some in classrooms? Reimagining the a la carte lines at the middle school and high school. Do we need to have those? They talked about students touching food less than they ever have before and maybe just having it all served to them. Plexiglass partitions was one that was talked about in the food service. The challenges that they've come up with initially were cleanup between lunch, cafeteria, or classrooms, when, the time that it takes, who's going to do it, all of those things. If we use gymnasiums and scheduling for those things, it's going to be really, really important. Transportation, drivers will wear face masks or shields. They've talked about that. Students will have a 2-week grace period if they forget to bring a mask from the beginning. We are requiring face masks on buses. Unfortunately, we can't transport 2,000 students and skip every other seat and have one kid to a seat. We just can't do it. And you're going to find that most districts in the state of Ohio are requiring face masks on a bus, limiting 2 to a seat, fitting siblings together as a primary source to transport students. We'll have disposable masks on the bus. We'll provide students with that. We don't want it to become somewhat of a crutch where they just say, well, I don't have to worry about it. I'll always get one every time I get on a bus. But we don't want to be penalizing in this situation, but we need folks to understand how important it is when we can't maintain that social distance. Bus sanitizing will be done after each route and a thorough cleaning at the end of the day. We're actually working at putting hand sanitizers on every bus. So when students get on, they can quickly do this and sit in their seat. There are challenges. One of their biggest challenges would be if we decide to go a hybrid or a yellow, that's a challenge for the transportation department, because first of all, we have to split these kiddos somehow and say, okay, this half comes this day, this half comes this day. How does that affect my route? Where do I go? We want to try to partner up siblings as best we can, right? And so there's some real challenges that they see as they start to work through some of our yellow plans. Custodial and maintenance, hand sanitizers in every classroom. We've upgraded air filters in every building. I know Rick is here. I'm going to recognize Rick here in just a little bit for all of his safety efforts. But as soon as this came out, I mean, he said, we're going to move to these upgraded filters in all of our units and talk to the health department about what that looks like. Daily cleaning routines before, during, and after school. We purchased these foggers for every building. Now, they're not to be used between classes. These are something that's going to be used at night. And the idea is these foggers will put down this right chemical that's supposed to be harmless to students, and it's supposed to sit there overnight. And it's supposed to, really do a good job of that. Obviously, during the school day, we've got spray bottles for every classroom. We've got the right chemicals that are not harmful to students and not, and Rick can share more about those specific things, but we're trying to put safety at the forefront of the things we're talking about. But we also have said additional personnel may be needed. If we're going to do thorough deep cleaning, that's a challenge. We might have to reassign staff to some instances, depending on what mode we're in. Stockpiling cleaning and safety supplies. We've been stockpiling them, but they could run out pretty quick. And so that's a challenge that their group is seeing. So as you take a look at this return to school options, this traffic light model, I mean, obviously we started with the aspirational goal to get every kid back in school and go green. We've always said all along that we need to be flexible and we need to be willing to move in different directions if need be. I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of districts that don't have a hybrid model. They have an all-in or remote, because hybrid in the middle is a challenge for a lot involved, but we wanted to keep those there just in case we needed to move between them. Our digital academy right now, I know people have questions about that. Before I came to this meeting, we had about 155 students who have already signed up for the digital academy. In other words, they have said that no matter how we open, we just feel more comfortable having our kids learn online at home. And so we're trying to navigate through those challenges of what that looks like, who's going to teach it. I would certainly love to start with our own staff teaching these subjects, especially our staff who are more compromised, but love teaching and want to stay in the game. But the other challenge is, quite frankly, when you have 155 students, and now I start to go down and look by grade level, I mean, it's not like there's 40 in first grade and I can just do away with the first grade and take that first grade teacher and plug them into the online academy. We'll probably find ourselves looking at, okay, I need probably a K-3 teacher and maybe a 4-5 teacher and maybe a middle school, high school. Where do they fit inside of all of those categories? So we're also looking to do that. I've said all along that we need academic flexibility. We're still in a level yellow. Talked with Julie Miller a little bit today. All area superintendents are meeting again tomorrow with Julie Miller and the health department to just review where we're at today. Believe it or not, we met 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, things looked differently. They're looking a little different now. I think it's fair to say that when we talk to her and ask her some very specific questions that Matt posed, it isn't just the numbers that are increasing. That's not that's not the sole indicator that she's looking for. We're looking for that. We're looking for hospital beds, how we can support those who maybe have come in contact with it. And so there are a variety of factors that they'll use before they just immediately turn us, from yellow to orange. It's not just about, hey, more people have tested positive. And I suspect that we'll have some interesting conversation tomorrow. The area superintendents we've worked with have been great. The health department's been great. And I think you're going to see us continue to evolve this thing as it goes. But I think we owe it to our kids to at least start this process with the aspirational goal of going green, and then we'll flex when we need to flex. And that could be sooner than later. Could be tomorrow. I don't know. But we're gonna do our best to try to make sure that we can make it work. Boy, that was a lot of talking.
You did a great job. Did a great job explaining. And as Bill alluded to earlier, I had made contact with several local health professionals, doctors, nurse practitioners, and a pediatric nurse, and they were all in support of going back to green, saying that the risk, the socialization and emotional risk to children were extremely high right now. Anxiety was at a high, and that we really need to get back in so that these kids can feel some normalcy in their life. So they all agree with the mask. So it was very interesting to kind of talk to the different people in our community. And I looked at some of the local school districts around us. And at this point in time, I could not find a district that was not going back full bore. So, and that, again, that is as of today. What is tomorrow? Nobody seems to know. So, and that was one of the doctors that I talked to today said, please be flexible. Please be flexible. Our kids need the flexibility. Our community needs the flexibility, but our community needs us to get back to some normalcy. So that was encouraging as we talked through that. So thank you.
Under other items for information, the one is for board members about OSBA Capital Conference. It's just informational for you. Whether we'll have Capital Conference or not, I'm not sure, but it is there for your information. Items 3 and 4 are really special items because I believe that our district has always prided itself in being safety minded and innovative. And a lot of that is the work of Rick Schaefer. Rick was given a Bureau of Workers' Compensation Safety Innovation Award. And it was for his efforts to the lockout mechanisms that we currently use throughout the building. And so, that was really nice to see. And he also brought back to the district some resources, $3,500 as he was a finalist in that. And Rick's only caveat that he told me when he brought me this was, it must be spent on safety. To go right along with that, we also have received accommodations from the Knox County Safety Council. We're always present at those meetings and lead in a lot of ways there. The district is putting together a blended learning or remote learning plan that we'll have to kind of match what we did similarly when we went into quarantine in the spring. And so just for the board members' information, that remote plan is in its final stages. This was mentioned tonight. I know I had a couple emails this morning when I was looking through my 8 pages of emails, and this racial injustice resolution was brought to our attention, and it was shared tonight by Andrea. I had several others who brought it to our attention as well. And so I've shared a link with the board about this. I briefly read through it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's an area we need to certainly be mindful of. And, you know, I would think that we could come up with a resolution that kind of really matches that aspiration and those goals. There's a neat Columbus Dispatch article. Andrea was right. It's really hard to find the actual resolution anywhere online, but I'm sure that'll be coming out. And then finally, I wanted to bring to the board's attention another item for information. We've had a community concern. I don't believe this is the first time this concern has ever come up, but it's regarding Dan Emmett Elementary and the name. Obviously, as we went through a period here at the beginning of the summer with a lot of protests and things like that, names and things on buildings has become to the forefront. And the Dan Emmett name is offensive to some. And we certainly want to recognize that that was a community concern that was brought our way. I also want to say that I don't think we should ever make knee-jerk reactions relative to those kinds of things. There needs to be a process involved to really look at what that looks like. And there are some wonderful examples out there right now of a process when you're taking a look at a particular building name and renaming it and what that looks like. And I'd like to bring back to the board at another board meeting what a process might look like, so that, you know, maybe we need to look at that and see where it fits and meets those merits. So I wanted to honor that email that was brought to me, or a couple emails related to this, and so I wanted the board to know that that was an item for information.
Thank you. I appreciate that we can talk through some of these concerns again and be as transparent as we can with our community on the things that we're hearing out and about our district. So thank you for sharing those.
Item B, I have a number of items recommended for board approval tonight. Home and community school student participation and elementary handbooks for your consideration.
I would entertain a motion for elementary handbooks. And I'm sorry, I just went blank on the other one, Bill. And I'm sorry, the two homeschool students for participation in athletics that we pray we get to have. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And a second? Thank you.
I will second it.
Dr. Bennett got in first.
Mr. Thompson made the motion and Dr. Bennett seconded that. Thank you. Are there any questions or concerns? Okay, hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Worthing?
Yes.
Mr. Golodai?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. And curriculum instruction. Dr. Bennett, student liaison report.
I think in the interest of time this evening, I will forego that.
Thank you.
Dr. Bennett did mention to me that she thought there might be other things, so that report is there for you to get a chance to read. It's always got some interesting articles and ideas, so be sure to take a look at that. And I already kind of shared a Digital Academy update with about 155 students already participating in that. And so we'll continue to monitor that. We may find ourselves needing to extend that deadline. August 1st was a deadline that we put in place to really help us better plan. But I realize that here we're sitting at the 20th, and 10 days from now, we may still not have quite enough information for folks to make that final determination. So we're certainly willing to look at extending that date if that needs to be done for our community.
Mr. Cedar,
Yes.
could you explain the process for enrolling in that program? I've had emails from parents who would like to know how to do that.
So we have had some questions from parents. If I choose to enroll my child in the Digital Academy, you know, can I re-enroll? And you know, our answer is yes. We always want to get our students back. We might find ourselves, though, creating some time intervals in order to come back. In other words, if you would commit yourself to being online and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later you say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. When you enroll, we're making a financial commitment for each and every one of these students. Right now, we're tentatively looking at the 9-week or semester to be able to make that kind of a comeback to the school. Right now, some of these licenses are anywhere from $1,000 to a student per student in certain instances. So we just got to be mindful of those resources and how that all works relative to students signing up for the digital academy. What we can't have is students going in and out and in and out. That's really, really challenging. But I also understand that some people are going to be a bit more cautious and they're going to go, I'm going to start out digital. I want to see how this thing all goes, right? And if it goes well, then they'll want to get their kids back. And so we always want to provide an on-road to come back. Did that answer your question, Dr. Bennett?
All I was asking was a very simple question of how do you enroll in the digital academy?
Okay.
How do they sign up for it?
Yeah, we have an online sign up. It's on the district website where parents can sign up for it. That's why we have 155 parents who are signed up already. So if parents want to sign up, go to the district website and the form is located there.
Okay, thank you.
I might add, in looking at the other school models in our county and outside, they all say the same thing. Minimum of 9 weeks. So
I found today
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
One of them was first semester. It was September through December. So you had to stay in for 2 9 weeks, and then the second half you could disenroll if you wanted to get back into traditional classroom.
Yeah. No items for board approval tonight in this section.
We'll move on to fiscal services and Mr. Hankins.
Well, the board's had an opportunity to view that report for at least a week because it was introduced at the work session. I wanted you to get a chance to kind of see the new format. So I don't really want to spend much time in that format unless you guys have any questions. There are some additional retroactive appropriations. As you guys know, in our world, we have to appropriate the money, get it certified to the county before in order to spend it. So we had some fiscal year 20 line items that went over the appropriated amount. That doesn't mean we didn't have the money. We did. We just have to go through the process with the county auditors to ensure that it is now appropriated. So I'm just bringing those 2 items for your approval.
And we had 2 donations.
Like those right now, or?
Yeah. No, we can go ahead for board approval.
Sorry, did you say go ahead? I apologize.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So
We
we did have 2 donations, both from the Twin Oak PTO to Twin Oak Elementary. They have donated a Padcaster system valued at $1,789.05. And they have also donated $7,210.95 for the purchase of 11 iPad Pro and leveled books for the book room. So we appreciate the Twin Oak PTO supporting this building. Thank you very much for those donations.
I would entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. And a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Is there any questions or concerns? Right. Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Golodat.
Yes.
Mr. Workman. Yes. Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzman.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Business services.
Yes, as Mrs. Bennett, Dr. Bennett mentioned, in the interest of time, you can peruse this very short report at your leisure. Thank you.
For those who couldn't hear, Mr. Guladai said that in the essence of time, she'll forego that legislative report for tonight and provided it to the board for review. So thank you, Mr. Guladai. Under recommendation items for board approval, we do have a investment provider service agreement. And I think Mr. Hankins has described that in the past relative to IRS regulations. We have item 2, which is Heartland Outdoor Educational Camp. We are certainly hopeful that we'll be able to provide that for our students this year. That is May 10th through the 12th. And then item 3 is a contract to work again with Wayne Bauer, part of AVT Company. Wayne does an amazing job for us in all of those endeavors. He did stipulate in that contract, though, that if we would have fewer events because of not being able to have events, that he would certainly work with us relative to that. And then item 4 is the approval of a resolution that we do every year involved with a cooperative purchasing group as we look at buses. Every year we try to maintain hiring or ordering 2 buses. We'll see how the year goes, but by approving this resolution, it gives us the best price we can moving forward. And then again, item 5 is the addition that I added at the beginning of the meeting with Tri-County Educational Service Center for our Medicaid billing. So those 5 items for board approval.
I would entertain a motion for the items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. And do I have a second, please? All right, thank you, Mr. Thompson, for the second. Do I have any questions or concerns? And I will say on the Heartland camp, we do have an opt that if we do have to cancel, we do not have to pay for that contract. So thank you for that piece of negotiation. Will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Regola Dye.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried. All right, student services.
Under student services, we have no items for information, several items for board approval. 4. The first are transportation contracts for privately owned vehicles. The second is a purchase service agreement for special needs students who are part of the LEAP program. And also an agreement for assistive technology. We've done this contract in the past for those that need that. And then finally, a contract for occupational and speech therapy for students in that LEAP program at Worcester. So those 4 items for your approval.
I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Regola Dye. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Regola Dye.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried. Moving on to personnel certificated.
Under personnel, we have no items for information at this time. We do have a number of items for board approval. We have a couple resignations. One is a department head and one is intervention specialist here at Twin Oak. Under employment, we have a number of items for a 5th quarter grant that is really retroactive for the 2019-20 year. Item 3, we have the employment of 1-year contracts, 2-year contracts, 3-year contracts, continuing contracts, even down to substitute teachers. Let's hope they all want to substitute for us. We do have some home instructors, generally our teachers who are willing to help for home instructional purposes. We usually hire a tutor through the Seventh-day Adventist. We have extended time contracts for guidance counselors. We did hire a new guidance counselor at the middle school to bring them up to a number that is manageable. And you'll also see the hires of a couple other folks as well. I guess I'll mention them here. Leanne Jerkowitz is going to be coming as a middle school guidance. Jared Pryor will be coming in as integrated social studies at the middle school. Karen Schrader is going to be coming in as an elementary music instructor. And Catherine Welsh will be coming in life, basically chemistry at the Mount Vernon High School. So we welcome those folks aboard. Hopefully we'll get a chance to welcome them a little bit more formally later on in a better setting. We have a number of administrative contracts for board approval, as well as treasurer mentor. And you're going to see a whole lot of supplementals. All of these supplementals, we really held off until July to hire these positions. All of these positions have a caveat under them that if for some reason we wouldn't be able to hold these extracurricular positions, that the board would have the ability to either null and void or prorate those contracts. So that's there as well. And we have some volunteers. And then item 4, which is in addition to the addenda, is a suspension of duties without pay for Andrew Walsh. And the board will meet at some time in executive session relative to that.
I would entertain a motion for approval for certificated staff.
I'll be happy to make that motion.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
And a second by Ms. Regola Dye. Thank you. Do I hear any questions or concerns?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Can item E and item J be handled separately as there be conflict? Item E, conflict for a couple of us,
Oh, that's true.
and item J, a conflict for me. So if we
Can,
could
if-
vote on everything else and have E and J handled separately.
Thank you.
I think we would have to rescind the motion and make a new motion to approve items,
All items except.
all items
E and J.
except those, and then we could go back and do those. So
Dr. Bennett, would you be willing to amend your motion?
I will, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Regola Dye?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we will pull out E and J and vote on those separately. Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Thank you. Hearing none, would you call the roll?
Mr. Regola Dye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes,
Then I would entertain a motion to approve letters E and J. Thank you, Mr. Workman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Regola Dye. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Mrs. Regola Dye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Abstain.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Abstain.
Dr. Bennett.
yes.
Thank you. Motion carried. And classified staff.
in our final section for tonight, under classified staff, no items for information, number of items recommended for board approval. Employment for 20 and 21, we have continuing contracts. We have a number of 2-year contracts in years 6 and 7 employment cycle, a number of 2-year contracts in years 2 and 3 of their employment cycle, substitute employments, administrator employments for directors of transportation, food service, and maintenance. And if you don't want to approve item 4, just let me know. I'll pull it out of the agenda. But honestly, I want to celebrate with Terry and her desire to retire. And so I would put all 4 items up for board approval.
With a heavy heart, I would ask for a motion, please. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And a second?
I'll second that.
I think Mr. Workman got you. Thank you, Ms. Regola Dye.
That's fine.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson. Yes. Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Ms. Regola Dye.
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann.
Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yes,
Motion carried. Thank you.
Under executive session, I'm at the pleasure of the board. If you'd like to have executive session due to the appointment or dismissal of an employee. Is there a desire to have that executive session tonight, or we'll let the actions carry forward and meet at a different time?
I move that we have executive session this evening.
Mary would like to go into executive session. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and end the regular portion of our meeting. We'll have to set up our opportunity to go to executive session. I don't anticipate any action will come out of executive sessions. We've taken some action already tonight. I just want to thank everybody for coming and for sharing. Appreciate it. We'll continue the work to try to put forth the safest and best plan possible. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming. April.
Did we call the roll on executive session?
Oh, sorry. Mr. Henkin, can you call the roll for executive session?
Mr. Golod, aye.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Workman.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Dr. Bennett.
Yeah. Thank you.